Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video, we're going to talk about Power Apps design ideas using the slider control. Now, we've all used the slider control and we all basically know what to do with it, but in this video, I'm going to share those tips and tricks to take the use of the slider control to the next level. So stick around, it'll be fun. But first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. Now, before we jump into the fun part about customizing it and thinking outside the box, I want to at least drop the slider control over here and let's take a look at some of its properties. So I'm on my Insert tab, and in this ribbon, I'm going to click on the Input and scroll a little bit down, and voila, there's our slider control. Let's bring him down a little bit, and there you go. On the right side, the few things I want you to keep in track of or keep mind of is default, because default is going to affect in some of our sliding technique that we use. Max and min for sure. In fact, some of the examples we're going to look at, we'll be bumping up the max to a higher amount, all right? Show value is also important. What show value means is that if I go and hover my mouse over the toggle, the slider toggle over there, the value, this 50 value that you're seeing, that is the value that it is showing. I can go ahead and disable this feature such that if I go and put my mouse over this, that value doesn't show up, all right? So that toggle functionality is also going to be important to us. Then next, as we continue, the handle size, this is called as the handle. Like, what is the handle that you're clicking on or you're dragging? What is that handle? Well, that's the handle size, and then we've got the handle as 24. Display mode, edit, and then the other one we'll be using in view is basically right now it's an edit functionality, which means I can edit the handle location or how much the handle value. Once I'm in the view side, that way I can only see what it is right now. I can't, and when I hover my mouse over it, I see the value, but I can't do anything. Trust me, I'm clicking on this, it's nothing happening. Again, another important one that we'll be using. And then finally, there's the other things over here where it's the coloring model. Rail is a big one. And okay, what Rail basically does is how I can go ahead and match this color versus the actual value. So let's actually tweak that right now so you'll understand what it is. All right, so this Rail over here, I am going to click on that Rail fill and I'm going to give it a really popping color. So I'll go ahead and change that to say yellow. You see that? I changed it to yellow, and now that value, the Rails actually value, went ahead and changed that to yellow. But if I want to go and say the value fill, like this is called as the value fill. What is the value, what is the color of the value that we are filling up this slider to? That is what's called as the fill value. And over there, I'll also go and give it a really powerful color like red. And so now you see the difference which is happening. This one is the value fill. We're using that value to fill up the entire colors over there, all right? So that's a very important thing, because we'll be using that in an example below. But these are some of the important properties that we'll be working with. Now let's go and add some of those out-of-the-box ideas applied over here. First thing is adding two other controls to take care of the sliding value. And for that, I'll actually use icons. So I'm going to come to my icons and I'll click on plus, but I'm not actually going to use this plus. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come onto my icon and I'm going to search for up. That's what I do, is I'm going to search for this one. That means when I click on this, I want the value to get bumped up a little bit. Also, I'm going to do a Control C, I'm going to do a Control V, and I'll grab this one, and I'm going to go back to the icon, and I'm going to search for down, and there you go, that's the down. So as you can see, this one on the left is going to bump up my value, this one on the right is going to lower my value, all right? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go and use variables. For that, on the app, when I click on the app, in its on start, I'm going to set a value. I'm going to set a variable. I'm going to call this as the var slider value, comma, and I'm going to set the default to say 0. All right, keep it that way. Next, I'll click on the slider value, and its default value, I'm going to change it to that var slider value. Next is I want to see what those values are. And just for that sake of this demonstration, I'll go and click on this label, and I'll also allocate that same value over here, var slider value, all right? And the reason this is all blank right now is because we need to click over here, and I'm going to go run on start, and voila, all this thing just takes effect over here. And as you can see, this toggle, it went ahead and slided to the left, and then the value got assigned over here. Well, we got to keep going on, all right? So first thing I'm going to do is for this one on the left, that is to increase the value. So now our formula needs to be tweaked a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do set, and this is going to be our var slider value, comma, var slider value plus 1. What that means is that every time I click on this, the value of the slider value is going to increase by 1. All right, so for the same thing though, I'm going to go ahead and now copy it, and I'm going to go now to this one on the right, and its on select is going to be the exact, it's going to be similar, but we're going to use a subtract 1 value. Okay, now all of this is set. Let's go and test it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bump it up, and because I went ahead and selected it, the on value started, it was at 0, but I clicked it, it became 0 plus 1. So I'm going to increase it, and as you can see, it's all taking effect. The value is changing, but the actual control is sliding, which means if I click over here, it should slide to the left, and it is working, which is really neat, because one of the reasons I use this is to give the end users the flexibility to control by how much measurement it should increase. Because let's face it, when you are going ahead and using a slider, you might not be able to fine tune to the exact amount that you want or the value that you want. But now, based on this functionality, you can, because you're only incrementing it based on one value, the value of 1, and it actually really helps. So now that you're thinking about it, I bet some of your wheels are turning in the back end. I'll show you some examples on that. First thing we'll do is we'll come over here. I'm going to bump up this max value to say 1,000. All right. And did you notice that this value switched over a little bit to the left? Sometimes people get confused that, oh, did it just automatically go back to 0? No, it did not. It went ahead and slided to the left because it's still keeping that value 7. However, the entire range has now gone up to 1,000. So it needs to kind of, put a very specific location matching that 1,000. And where so 7 suddenly becomes a much smaller number based on the 1,000. That's why it went ahead and slided to the left. The overall value is still 7. Don't, think that it became 0 again. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So what we'll do now is on this bumping it up over here, I'll go ahead and now say, I don't want to increase it on increments of 1. I want to increase it on increments of, say, 0. All right, and which means over here, I'll go ahead and say, I want to decrease it on increments of 0. So check this out. All right, so now I'm going to go bump it. Oh, 7 became 17, which means it did increment on increments of 10, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, this is now growing. It's actually growing because, or it's increasing because even though this is up to 1,000, it's bumping up on increments of 10. So kind of, do you understand how this is working? Because check this out. I'm putting whole numbers. You could use this for up to decimal places too, because sometimes you want to bump it up to 0.5 level or 1 level. This is how you do it. You decide how much it should increment by just adding a plus value or subtracting a plus value. See, that's a really neat idea over there. But let's continue. Let's have some fun over here. What we did is we used the slider value to actually get some numbers. And sometimes that number is all that you need for a situation. But how can I leverage those numbers for something else? See, that's where the outside the box thinking is happening. And the first place we can do is actually the text font. So here, I'm going to go ahead and drop now a text input control. And I'll make it a little big because we're going to have a little bit fun with this. And I'll change the text to wow. All right, the default text. So there it is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage this slider controls value for our text font size. So what I'm going to do is I will come on my text font size. I just click over here. This is something that I do is instead of me coming over here and searching for the property, I just find the property because it's all visible over here and just click on that, the label piece of it, and it comes up over there. All right. So the slider is called as slider 3. Well, I'll go ahead and now change that. Select that control, slider 3. And here's another neat thing. The slider, mostly knows that, hey, if you're going to use that name, more than likely it's going to be for the slider value. Therefore, the default name, which is slider value 3, gives you the slider value 3, the value itself. However, if you just want to be extremely sure and get, say, I want the, here's the property name. Here's the label name, but I want the property. Then I'll do slider 3 dot, and I can still go ahead and put in the value and does the exact same thing. All right. So just kind of think about that. But check this out though, it's kind of fun. Now, if I go ahead and now lower it, even the font size is decreasing. So I can control all of this font and its font size using the slider value. Well, let's think about this though. It's fun over here, but where do we use it? Imagine the situation where you want your headers and your footers to be of a certain font size. And every once in a while, you want to tweak it. You want to go and change the size of it because sometimes you might have a different app or for whatever reason. instead of you going to each and every header and changing it over there, and by the way, this applies to even the with the components from a components library, because you'll have to change that as well. You apply it to one slider value. This is the slider control, and I'll come over here now to that slider control, and I'll change this value. And because I change this value, all of the other values for the font size will change as well. See, the ideas that I'm giving you over here is that you're using the slider control now to even control the text font size. But let's not stop over here. What are the other things that we can use that to change its size? And what is the other thing that I use a lot more? Well, it's buttons. So let me click on the buttons over here. Let me go and grab a button. We'll just make this one a little bit out of over here. We'll grab this button. And now we're going to actually go ahead and tweak the button size. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, one of the things I do about my buttons to actually get that nice circle button effect is I go ahead and mess with the sizes. So I make sure that the height, the width, and the border radius is of the exact same size, and I get that circle. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and now change this to say 150, 150. I do that, and if I go to the border radius and make that as 150, it becomes a perfect circle. Well, now let's go ahead and apply the slider value to all of those places. So I'll go ahead and make sure that I've got that slider value, all right? Now here in the button, if I go and click on width, its width is going to be the slider 3 dot value, all right? Next, I'm going to go and click on, as by the way, see when it becomes dynamic, it changes. This is static, this is dynamic. Height, I go and get that as a slider value 3 dot value, and there you go. So right now itself, you can see that if I start playing with it, it will grow. So watch this. See, the overall amount grew. It's pretty neat how this works. I just love the functionality. In fact, there's a couple of things you can do to really mess with this. I'll show you an example. If you went and applied the border radius, see right there, if I went and now changed that to slider value 3 dot value, because that's the actual name over here, watch what happens. Sometimes you start seeing something really weird. You see that design that's happening? Watch this. It is so interesting how this design happens. It's kind of, I think, I won't say it's a design flaw. It's just something very, very interesting that happens in Power Apps design, specifically in the studio. Because watch what happens. Now, if I go see that property, it changes. So when I click on this, you see that property, it is property radius, but it doesn't give me a number. See, these two gives me a numerical value. This tells me multiple. So if I click on it, it actually went and changed that to the radius top left. Not really sure why it does that, but I do like the design effect that it gives, because hey, that might be something that you want to work with. Thought I'll just share that little, tip with you all. So we looked at size, the font size. We looked at making the button a little big, its size. We looked at even changing the shape of the button. Well, now let's focus our attention on matching colors. So for that, I'm actually going to come to and create a new screen. So we have something simple to work with. I'll go ahead and drop that button one over here again. All right, just make a nice big button so we can actually just see what is the color of that button. And now I'm going to drop 3 sliders. So watch this. I'll come now to my input. I'll again scroll down and I'll get this slider. And I'm going to name this slider. I'm going to name that as my red slider. I'll copy this, do a Control-C, Control-V, move it down over here. That is my green slider. And then I'll again do a Control-C, Control-V, and I'll go ahead and call this as my blue slider. Are you kind of catching the drift of what I'm going with this here? Some of you might already think, oh, Daniel's talking about red, green, blue, RGB. Exactly. That's what I'm going to be doing over here. So watch this, all right? So we're going to go ahead and grab this RGB, and now we're going to start tweaking with this so we can get the color over here. So watch this effect. Now, before I go and tweak any of this, I want to actually get the value of the RGB. And so I'm going to drop again another label, because that's how we can actually see what is this RGB values coming over here. So watch this. I'm going to actually first just start simple. I'm going to call this the red slider dot value. All right. So I can got that value over here. Next, I'll just go and say, and I'll put in space, or maybe I can just put in space, comma, space, and then double quotes. Then another and I'll put in the green slider value. All right. Dot value. And then as you can see, it's coming up over here. The values are making sense. Continue, keep going forward. And space, double quotes, space, comma, space, double quotes, then another and then after that, I'll put in my blue slider value. All right. And so we are able to get this effect over here, and it looks pretty neat. So that's the one that we're going to be tweaking. And just in case if some of your other things, Daniel, how do I just get all the RGB in the text so it just looks nice? How do I get that? You're adding values over here. How do I also put text in? Since you asked, I'll just go and finish that as well. So what I hear is I'm going to go and put in my another ampersand. And then before that ampersand, I'm going to put in double quotes. And this double quotes is going to be RGB. I'll put in a brackets space over here. And guess what? I'm going to add the exact same thing away towards the end. Space. And then double quotes, space there, and there you go. And that way it looks like it's an RGB. So just thought I'll give you the full effect over here. But that doesn't solve this problem. Over here, this is what we're going to do. In this color right now is coming from a fill. That's also a very important thing you need to know, because sometimes it gets confusing between what is it, a border color or is it a fill color? So here it is, it's coming from a fill, all right? Keep that in mind. And just to test it, if I go ahead and put this color, well, it changed it. So kind of keep in mind which one it is. It's not the border that we are changing, it's the fill that we are changing. All right. So now I go to the fill and I'm going to start tweaking this. So one of the good things I like is how it's giving me this information over here. It's saying, okay, the first thing you need is the red, then the green, then the blue. So that's what I'm going to do. This first thing I'm going to add is the red slider dot value. All right. I'm going to grab that, comma, and then I'm also going to grab the green one. See, that's what it says. So that's the green slider value. Okay. And again, I'm putting in the dot value. You don't have to do that. All right. You can just leave it at the default. And then the blue slider, again, I'm going to put in the blue slider dot value. Okay. And then after that, you have to go ahead and either put it in the 1 or the 0. In this case, I have to put in the 1. But see, it already gave me this coloring effect. So if I now go and start playing with this, whoa, you see how I'm messing around with the colors? Because I'm actually getting the RGB value. Well, Daniel, how does this help? Well, think about it. Sometimes your company, if you want to match the branding, you've got very specific RGB values to match. And what you can do now is you can make it consistent. You go ahead and find out exactly what those RGB values are by either doing it sliding this way, or the previous example that I showed by putting in the toggling up or the toggling down to get that exact numbers. You can do it that way as well. But either way, you get that exact value over here, and this is what displays it. But here's the ultimate one. Now, say for whatever reason, okay, I've got an icon. I've got a really nice icon. If I click on that and I'll go ahead and scroll down and I'll go and get my circle. If I click on the circle and bring it over here, now for that circle color, I don't have to go ahead and put in each RGB value. I go ahead and get this one. So what I do is I'm going to change the button name. I'm just going to call that as my color, all right, main color. Now, oh, it's already being used. I'll just go and call that as color button, all right? So I'll click on this one now, and this one's color, I'll click on it, and instead of this, I'm going to call that as my color button dot fill. And there you go. But watch this though. If I went and changed this, it also gets affected over here. See, this is how you can make this as a one central location to change the colors of everything else in your app or specific things in your app, all in one central location. But now I've made it much more easier because you can go and match it right down to the RGB value based on your company's branding standards. You see, all of that was done using the slider value over here. So let's keep the momentum going and now switch gears a little bit by working with data and how slider values can help us improve that. So for that, I'm actually going to go to a different screen, and I'm also going to use some of my SharePoint lists. So the first thing I'm going to use the slider functionality to help me filter some data in a gallery. And for that, I'm actually using some good data. What I have over here is my North Carolina Department of Transportation data. This list actually has over 40,000 items of data. And just to make sure, I'll show that to you. See, that's the list, 44,735, which means I'll also be testing the slider value to see, hey, do I run into delegation problems? We'll see. So what I'm doing is I'm going to actually focus on these rows of data and do some filtering based on them. Now, a little tidbit I'll share with you is that when you're using the slider value, basically to filter slider value, numerical value with numerical data, you want to make sure that your SharePoint column at least has a numerical column. All right. So which basically, if I go to the list settings, I already have one which is of this year 2015 to the number. Now I'll share a little tidbit. Now do this tidbit at your own caution because sometimes it might cause a problem. Most of the time, it's always accurate. Is you can take an existing single line of text, and if it only, I repeat, if it only has numerical values, you can switch that over to number and your data will remain. And we'll do this as a test. Watch this. I'll go to my North Carolina Department of Transportation, and the one that I want to use is this 2017 column. This 2017 column, we'll go back over here to our list settings. The 2017 column is a single line of text. I'll come in over here and I'll go ahead and change that to number. And it's going to go ahead and do that. Now watch, when I go and click on OK, it is going to give me this alert. Hey, when changing this data type may result in loss of data, so kind of be careful. So I'm going to click on OK, all right? And it is going ahead and changing the column. Now we go back over here to the actual list view, and I'm scrolling to the right, and there you go. The 2017 hasn't lost any data, right? It's just a little tidbit that I'm going to share with you. Cool. So now I go back to our Power Apps, and I've already gone ahead and made a connection to my data source. And just a little tidbit, when you made a change over there, you want to go ahead and make sure that you refresh it because the data type just got changed over there. All right, so I'll come now and I'm going to drop a gallery. And in my gallery, the most of the data that I'm only going to be viewing is text. So it's layout, I'll change that, and I'll go ahead and just grab one right now, right? And then the gallery, it'll go ahead and change that to the data source is this list. And we've already gotten this nice information over here. But the one thing I want you to be aware of is the list ID. Now, for those of you who don't know, SharePoint list ID is a numerical value which SharePoint automatically applies to it to tell you what is the value numbers. For example, if you put the first item, it's 1, so on and so forth. In this case, we've got over 44,000. So the list ID values will actually have more than 44,000. And that's important for you because when you're doing the slider testing over there, I want you to see that this will still overcome any delegation problems because the data source is SharePoint and also the formula we'll be using. So what I'll do is I'll do a Control-C, a Control-V, and I'll go ahead and change that to .id, all right? So we've got that. That way you can actually start seeing some values. And I'll move this a little bit to the right just in case, these values can get increased. I don't need that. Go ahead and get this over here. Move that up a little bit. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to bring this down. So we've got a lot of data coming in. This is neat. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go and drop our slider control. And that's in the input. We'll come back over here, click on the slider control. I'm moving this a little bit to the right. So our objective is now to go ahead and see what are the data for that specific year. We selected the 2017. So what I'll do is I'll go and select this data over here. I'll go and click on Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to move this to the right a little bit, and I'm going to change this to 2017. Okay, and there you go. This is all the data that's coming in. Now what I want to do is I want to do some filtering based on this data. Well, what is my filtering going to be? Based on the value of the item that I've selected, the slider value, if it is over, say, a certain amount of number, which is 500, then I should see only all the incidents that have happened outside the number of 500. Make sense? Let's actually do a testing. So what's happening right now is first, I'm going to bump up this value for the slider. This value is the maximum is at 100. I'm going to bump that up to say 100,000. So I'll go ahead and put that at 100,000. As you see the toggle switch to the left, remember what happened? The value is small, so it just moved a little bit to the left. All right, so I click on that one and the slider value is 5. Okay, click on that. So I am going to now put in a filter function. I'm going to put filter, I'm going to put that value, comma, and this one is the 2017. If it is, say, the value greater than or equal to slider 5.value, if it is equal to that, then show me the data. Well, there it go. There it's going ahead and filtering it. It's, I can see those ants marching over there. And right now it's showing me all this data. But let's go and test this now, all right? So I'm going to now go and click on plus. And if I hover my mouse over this, you see the value is 50. Which is why over here, we are seeing anything, this value is over 50 for that year 2017. But watch this. Now remember, since this max value is over 100,000, this scrolling is going to go really fast. Watch this. So if I now just click on it, it already went to 29,000. But watch out. All of these things got filtered and it's only showing me items from past 20,000. But here's the important thing. Remember, these are list IDs. This is telling me which actual row value of that. Now, I have not changed my default 500 pulls. That's the 500 delegatable thing. It's already going past 500. Heck, it already went past 2000. So we're not running into any delegation issues over here. And just to be even sure, if I were to go and click on this guy, you will see I'm not getting any squiggly lines. So successfully we've used the slider value to do filtering for us, not having any delegation volume, because we went ahead and used the correct formulas. So this is kind of pretty neat. Like over here, you can actually just do some sliding to actually see all the data that's coming through. You don't have to type anything in. You don't have to, put in clicking on any buttons or anything. No multiple steps. You just click on it once and you can go sliding back and forth, and you're able to see a whole bunch of good information. In fact, I can see there's nothing beyond that. And so if I scroll down a little bit more, that's when I start seeing some data. It works, and it works really well thanks to the slider functionality over here. All right, so the last one that I'm going to show you, and this is the one that you will really like, is how I can make a bar graph. Yeah, you heard me right. A bar graph using the slider functionality. So for that, now let me go ahead and put in another screen. And over here, I'm going to use another SharePoint list. This is the list basically where I'm going ahead and capturing any donations that is made for a certain event. Basically, I'm just going to say that, hey, this is the bar that we have to achieve for our donations, and this is the current amount. We're going to actually use the slider control for that. But the SharePoint list is just that. Somebody goes ahead and submits, an amount, and you can put any note for that amount. It does that. But the additional functionality that I'm going to use is I'm going to constantly calculate the aggregate sum of the amount that is coming in. It'll make more sense in a minute. So let's go back to our Power Apps. And by the way, I've already gone ahead and made a data connection to donations over here. All right. So let's go back over here to my correct screen. Make sure I'm on that screen. And here I'll go ahead and first add a form. So this is going to be my form. And I always go and use an edit form. And in my edit form, I'm going to select it to the donations. It'll already go and populate a whole bunch of things, fields. I don't need all of them. So I'll keep it at just one column. And let's see, what do I don't need over here? I don't need the attachments. I'll go ahead and get rid of that. And I'll keep the remaining, all right? And scroll that up a little, reduce the size. I'm going to click on a button because I will be submitting some data. All of that looks good. Let's also go and grab a gallery so that we can actually see data that is coming in. Oops, wrong one. See the data that is coming in from the donation side. And I'll just go ahead and make it as a small one. This is going to be the note. So I'll add definitely that note over here. I'll also do a Control-C, Control-V, and we'll add the actual amount that was put in. Amount. And you know what? I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because I'm also going to go and see not just the amount, but I also want to see the sum, because that's how we're going to keep track of the aggregated amount of data. All right. So there we go. Got all this done. It'll start making more sense. Now this button, which by the way is going to be my submit button, all it's going to do is go ahead and submit the form. That's all it's going to do. All right. Now this button, all it's going to go and do is submit the form. So that's why all I have to do is select the submit form, and there I'll type in, I'll type in the form number 1 right there. And just to have extra precaution, I'll also go and reset the form, right? So reset the exact same form. That way it'll finish, it'll submit the data, and it'll go ahead and also reset it. But there's a few things that I want to do over here. Note is good, amount is good. It's the sum. The sum is the one that I want to go ahead and tweak a little. So watch this, all right? I'm going to first click on this card, and I need to go ahead and unlock it. And then specifically for this value over here, this guy, for this sum, and specifically for the sum card value, I'm going to go and change its default value. Get the value of the previous amount. We will go ahead and add it to this new amount and put that as a sum. Let's see how that works. So I'll go now to my default first, and I'm going to say, get me the last amount from donation, specifically its sum. I'm going to go and get the sum plus what is the existing value of the amount. The existing value of the amount is coming from this data card. So that I click on the data card. On the top, I go and do a Control-C, come back over here, and I'll do a sum plus, click on that, and I'll go ahead and get the text. So as you can see, there is no previous value because we haven't added anything. That's why the value is coming as 0. But this is where we can start doing some tests. So check this out, all right? Oops, let me go ahead and click on my form. And in my form, in its item, I gotta put in defaults, all right? Defaults, I go and put in donations right here. Cool. So the first one, I'm going to say note donation, all right? This one's amount, I'm gonna go and put that as, say, 1,000. See, that came in where what it actually went and did was actually try to get the previous one item and then do a plus 1,000, but there was nothing in the previous. Therefore, its value and the previous and the sum is always 0, but this will change. So watch what's going to happen right now. I'm going to go ahead and say note, again, donation to, here the amount I'll put in as just 100, all right? But you see what happened? This value changed to 1100, because what it did was it went ahead and grabbed the previous item, which is 1000, and went ahead and did an add over here. So now I went and get it as 1100. So it's actually keeping a sum of all it is. And if you can see that 1100 is correct, original amount was 1000, second amount was 100. So the total value is the 1100. Well, Daniel, how is this going to help me? Check this out, all right? Because now we're going to go ahead and actually add our new functionality for the slider. So I'll come in my input. I'm going to go ahead and add my slider. This time we got to make a little bit of changes. So watch here. In the properties, I'm going to go to layout, and I'm going to go ahead and make this vertical, all right? Which means it's gone ahead and become really big right now. Next thing we got to do is we got to go ahead and actually make a little bit of changes. First thing I want to do is this rail. I'm going to go ahead and change that rail from 3 to say 300. See, now that's kind of looking like a nice bar graph functionality over here. And since we are at the rail, I'm going to go ahead and actually change its color to say green right here. So as you can see, the top one is green, but we want to change the bottom one's green to say gold, because that's the final value. We want to go ahead and change entire thing to gold. So I'll go to the fill value, or I can just click over here to the fill value, and I'll go ahead and give it a nice goldenish color, which is right here, right? Because we want this to go up. This is also a good point where you can actually go ahead and either keep the handle size to 24, or you can go ahead and remove it to whatever you want. So you can keep it at 24, or you can even put it as 0.1, and it almost disappears. I'll leave that to your discretion. Now in this slider, in its default, I'm going to go into my default, or I can just click over here, default, and here I'm going to go and change its value. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and say the donations list, go ahead and get me the last item of the donations list, specifically its sum value, which means go ahead and get me whatever is the last item, get me its sum value. So here we go. I'm going to click on last, click on that, and then I'm going to go to my donations list, and I'm going to close it and specifically look for its sum. And that's basically how the default value is going to be. Well, Daniel, it went and filled it up. What does that mean? Well, what it means is our max value is less than that. So say our goal for our donations is 100, or say at 10,000, I'll go and make that as 10, 0, 1 more, 2 more zeros. And you see what's happening over there? You've just successfully built the bar graph. But let's do some testing, all right? So I'm going to come on that, and I'm going to say donations, and I'm going to change that value to say another 1,000, and it went ahead and update over here. Click on submit. Ooh, it went ahead and grew up over there. Cool. As you can see, the values are growing, 1,000, 100, 1,000, but the aggregate, the total sum is actually constantly increasing. And you can keep doing that. Other thing I would recommend is this sum value. When you select it, go ahead and make that as a edit item. I mean, right now it's by default edit, the display mode. You can go ahead and change the display mode to only display, to only view. That way, people don't go ahead and add more values over there. Just make sure that your formula is nice and good. Other thing you can do is just go and hide that as well. But let's just do another test. I'll go ahead and say, from me, I'll put in a really good amount. Like I'm going to put 5,000. This will go and get bumped up to 7,100. Click on submit. Boop, it went and got up over there. Isn't this awesome? You just went ahead and built a dynamic bar graph using the slider control over there. Wasn't that awesome? We accomplished so much using that slider value. And yes, we went and used some of its traditional design ways, but we also did some fun ideas thinking outside the box. So hopefully this was helpful. And as always, keep using Power Apps. Hey everyone, hopefully you found this video useful. And if you did, can you help me help you? Can you subscribe to this YouTube channel? Because remember, I provide fresh content on a weekly basis, and it's 100% free. So if you have subscribed, thank you so much, and pass the word. But if you haven't, subscribe, click on the bell notification, and let the learning begin.